I'd like to welcome you all to our webinar on Seeing Faces and Vision Loss, presented by Dr. Jo Lane from the Australian National University. Dr. Jo Lane is a research fellow and clinical psychologist at the Research School of Population Health at the Australian National University. She was awarded a Doctorate of Philosophy in 2018 from ANU. Her PhD research focuses on improving face perception, social interactions, and quality of life in people living with age-related macular degeneration. Dr. Lane's research interests intersect across psychology, health research, population health, translational research, personalised medicine, and communication in science. Welcome, Dr. Jo. Hopefully you're coming up. Perfect. Hello.
Awesome. Hello. Good afternoon.
Hopefully you can start sharing your screen.
Okay, we're good?
Ready to go.
Lovely. All right. So good to see everyone. Well, I can't see you, but to have you here joining us today. So I'd like to thank the Macular Disease Foundation Australia for inviting me to speak today. And as Niv acknowledged, I live in Ngunnawal country, which is in Canberra, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I live and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. And I also want to pay my respects to the traditional elders of the land that you are meeting on today as well. So I am going to talk about seeing faces and vision loss. So some background about me. Niv did a beautiful intro for me. So I am a research fellow. I'm a clinical psychologist and a cognitive psychologist. So that means 1 day a week, I actually see clients in private practice. My specialty is trauma. So I see a lot of clients who have post-traumatic stress disorder, who are first responders and veterans. And I'm also a cognitive psychologist because I love the brain and I love the way the brain works, and my expertise in that area is face perception. So how the brain perceives faces. So I have 2 children, I'm a mum, and I love to run. So because I'm in Canberra, there's a huge population of trail runners here. So the hillier and the longer, the better for me. So this photo is of me in Washington, DC on the 2nd of March this year, 2020. So this is the calm before the storm, how things have changed since I took this photo. My first time to DC and I was super excited. So that's me with an absolute genuine smile in that photo today. So today I'm going to discuss how faces appear for people living with AMD. So I'm going to refer to age-related macular degeneration as AMD from now on in. And I'm also going to talk about the impact of reduced face perception on social interactions and quality of life. So why faces? Why do we, love faces? Why are they so important to us? Well, you might recognise some familiar faces there. So they tell us who a person is, so we recognise people by their face. They can tell us things about the person's mood, so how they're feeling. Are they feeling happy or sad? They can tell us about a person's culture or their heritage, where they've come from. We can tell from their face a person's age, their gender, their social status, how attractive they are, and we can tell if someone's engaged by looking at us through their eye contact, if they're interested in what we're saying, and they help us with things like lip reading, so verbal cues around speech. So we've got the Queen and we can tell she's quite affluent, she's got lots of pearls and jewellery on. We can tell that she's a female and she's an older adult. So I've got some examples there. She looks pretty happy in that photo, and we've got people from different backgrounds there as well. And that little person is now, she's one of my daughters who's now a teenager. So that's how old that photo is. So faces are super important for social interactions and they tell us a lot of information. So if you have been diagnosed with macular degeneration or someone that you know has, you probably thought that when you got the diagnosis, what is this condition? I need more information. So you probably went to a website similar to this one and you would have seen an image like this. So it portrays normal vision on the left-hand side, or my left-hand side, and then it portrays this image of us, it says the same scene affected by age-related macular degeneration. So I'm sure if you saw this for the first time, you're probably thinking, wow, this is pretty confronting. But it doesn't show that the impact of AMD can be very complex and it's unique to each individual. It depends if you have AMD in one eye or both eyes. So if you have it in one eye and your other eye doesn't have any eye condition, you tend to use the stronger eye. So you may not see this if you have macular degeneration in one eye. So this is a commonly portrayed image that we see on websites. But research shows it's actually not entirely accurate. So some researchers in the UK showed us that that scene overemphasizes scotomas. So scotomas is that black blob in the middle of images around macular degeneration, and it's too simplistic. So again, there's a high level of variability across what people can see living with macular degeneration. Not everybody has that black spot or the scotoma in the middle of their central vision. And people also talk about a lot of other phenomena that they do see. So that might be blur. So a lot of people say that their vision is quite blurry. They say that some of the image is missing. So there's missing parts of the image. There's distortions, and that can be movement or things that look a little bit strange, and lots of other things. So why, what do we know about macular degeneration and face perception? So as I said, faces give us a lot of information. They tell us who a person is. And people with macular degeneration report that they can't tell who a person is by their face. So we call that face identification. So recognizing someone by their face. People with AMD also report that they have a difficult time seeing facial expressions. So whether someone's smiling and happy or someone's frowning and sad, they really struggle to see those parts of the face, and so they can't see that. Another thing that they find hard is that they can't see other face cues. And what I mean by that is things like eye contact, so they can't see if someone's looking at them. They can't see lips. So a lot of people who have hearing loss rely on lips for lip reading. And also when you're in a noisy or crowded room, we also rely on lips for lip reading. So people with macular degeneration, we know in the research says that I can't see faces, so I can't work out who a person is from their face. I find it hard to see facial expressions, and I find it hard to see other facial cues like lip reading or eye gaze. Now, the thing to remember here is the variability that I've talked about, not only for each person's vision and how that varies, but also lots of other things. So the severity of AMD obviously impacts this, whether it's in one eye or both eyes, and distance. So if you're far away from a person, this is more difficult, and also lighting. So, some people with macular degeneration say they prefer bright light, whereas others don't. So they're the other external factors that we need to consider. So previous research that's looked at the impact of impaired face perception has been conducted not in macular degeneration, but actually in a condition called prosopagnosia, otherwise known as face blindness. So a lot of people actually have face blindness. There's famous people including Stephen Fry, who's the comedian and author, and Alan Alda from MASH. And previous research has shown that because they're unable to recognize faces, they have some issues with social interactions. So people with face blindness report that they cannot recognize people they know near and dear to them. So they can't recognize their own children, they can't recognize their friends or family, and they can't even recognize themselves. So when they look in a mirror and they see a reflection, they actually don't know who that is. So all their other capacities are intact, it's just they cannot recognize faces. So essentially, some people with this condition can recognize parts of the face, so they can see if someone's happy or sad, or they can tell if they're female or male, whereas others just can't work that out at all. So an example of that is Alan Alder from MASH came to ANU a few years ago, and he essentially required a personal assistant with him at all times because he was speaking and he was meeting a lot of people, and the assistant needed to tell him, you know, Alan, that's Bob, you've already met him 3 times today, because you really can't tell who people are from their face. And Dr. Carl is an Australian who has face blindness, and he reported feeling unhappy and sad as a child and lonely because he couldn't work out who people were in his social environment. And he says he takes a seating map now to work, so he knows where his colleagues sit around the workplace. So studies that have looked at prosopagnosia and the impact it has on social interactions report that people often feel anxious in social interactions, which makes sense. They worry that they're going to offend others because they don't recognise them. They often feel embarrassed and guilty, and the best way to get around that is to avoid social situations. So I have met a client who has prosopagnosia who came for clinical psychological therapy because they found social interactions really difficult. And they thought they had social anxiety, and they probably did, but they also had social anxiety because they couldn't recognise people by their face. So how do we get around this? People with face blindness say that they use other strategies to recognise others. So they might recognise others by their clothes or their voice or the way they walk, or context is really good. So there's a lot of things we can use. The problem with those things is that they're often unreliable. So context, if someone's out of context, you're not going to recognise them. And if you use their hair as a cue to who they are, if they get a haircut, you're in trouble. So there has been research on prosopagnosia. So we suspected that people with AMD might have similar findings in relation to face perception and social interactions. So there have been very few studies related to face perception for people living with macular degeneration. And often studies are focused on things like the impact of not being able to read or drive or do other activities like that. But the small amount of research that was conducted showed similar results to people with face blindness. So they found it hard to recognise faces, by their identity, so who a person is. They often could misinterpret social situations, and they found it hard to follow conversations because they weren't able to lip read. So, and they also were worried about offending others. So we thought, well, let's do a study, a comprehensive study on this. So the aims of our study, because there was really very little research in this area, was to examine the importance of reduced face perceptions and social interactions and quality of life in AMD. And we also wanted to understand the effects of poor face perception on social interactions. So we did the first systematic in-depth examination of the impact of reduced face perceptions on social interactions and quality of life in people living with macular degeneration. So this is the study. I'm going to give you the link to these at the end of the presentation, and I think Niv might send these to you as well. So this is the research article. It's available online, and I'll give you the link to it. And I want to show this to show you the comprehensive research team that was involved in this project. So there's myself, Emily and Farhan are orthoptists, Rowan is an ophthalmologist, Ted is a vision scientist, Amy, Rachel and Eleanor are face perception experts, and then we've got 2 engineers. So it's quite a comprehensive team that got involved in this research. So it's a great team to work with. So for our research study, we had 21 people living with AMD. Now we needed them to have AMD in both eyes because we basically said we need people who report having difficulty seeing faces in their everyday life. They were aged 66 to 92 and they had mild to severe vision loss. So we suspected obviously people with moderate to severe vision loss would have trouble seeing faces, but we didn't know what people with mild vision loss in AMD would have. So we wanted to do the whole spectrum of vision loss. So some people with mild vision loss had quite good vision. They were still driving. They had like a 6, 7.5 as their visual acuity, whereas the people with severe vision loss were definitely legally blind, and their vision was much worse than that. So 6/190, just sort of give you an indication. So AMD in both eyes, from mild to severe vision loss, and they had a full vision assessment. So we have the clinics at ANU, so they had a full vision assessment to make sure there was no other visual conditions that were there. So we conducted interviews. So there were 2 interviews we did. The first one took about 45 minutes. And essentially we just wanted to ask about their everyday face perception and how it, is impacted by AMD and how that impacts their social interactions and quality of life. The 21 participants did the interview, and we did it sort of a top-down and bottom-up approach. So the top-down means that we wanted to sort of ask questions around face theory. So we wanted to ask about identity, expression, and facial cues to speech, etc. But we also wanted to get new information. So we asked open-ended questions to get new information that we didn't know, because this research hasn't been conducted before. So lots of questions about face perception, face identity, facial expression, and eye gaze, and visual cues to speech. And we asked about alternative strategies. So what alternative strategies do people use when they're trying to recognize people by their face if they can't see faces well? And we also asked about problems with social interactions and whether their vision loss and this impacted their confidence and willingness to engage in social situations, and did it impact their quality of life. We also had a section in the interview on technology as well. So that was interview 1, and then interview 2, 19 of the 21 participants did interview 2 as well. And we actually designed some resources to talk about the findings from the first interview, and we asked the participants to provide feedback to enhance those resources. So I'm actually going to go through those at the end of today's presentation. Okay. So let's get to the findings. So all participants said that their vision loss made it harder to see faces. So everybody said, yep, I can't see faces as well. So this was people from mild, moderate, and severe. So this was a surprise. We didn't expect it to be a problem in mild AMD when it turns out it is. So 91% said they didn't recognize people. So this is known as a false negative, when you don't recognize someone you actually know. So I'm going to give you some quotes today just to give you an idea of what this means. So this person has mild AMD, and they said, I have had it happen. It's very embarrassing. The other day, I didn't even recognize my son within a yard or 2 of me, and I didn't recognize him. He said, Mum, it's David. So I'm obviously not using names of people here, change names. But essentially this woman she sat outside of her property and she wasn't expecting her son that day, and he walked up to her and she didn't recognize him. And she said that was the first time her son actually said, Mum, you really can't see me. And she's like, no, I really can't. So that was her experience there. So as well as having a false negative, so not recognizing someone you do know, we call this a false positive. So when you go up to somebody and say, hi, how are you going? And they're like, I don't know who you are. So when we make a mistake, so 71% said they do this. So someone I knew very well, I went up to them and started having a conversation with them, and they looked at me blankly. And when I was closer, I thought, yeah, you're not who I thought you were. I apologized to them, but what they thought, I don't know. So this person had moderate vision loss due to their AMD, and they went up to a stranger thinking they knew that person, and they didn't. And you could imagine you'd be quite embarrassed if you did that. So as well as having issues with recognizing people they do and don't know, people said that all participants said that their vision loss made it harder to see the facial expressions. So being able to see whether one's smiling or frowning, or trying to determine how they're feeling based on their expressions. So this person who has mild AMD says, yes, I think that was one of the first things that went not actually seeing the expression. And another one who has moderate AMD, as far as expressions go, that's something that's gone. And another one with severe says, well, you don't get facial expressions with this disease. So we were quite surprised from the reports that people said this was actually the first thing they noticed. They couldn't see facial expressions, and it went very early during their condition. So we're trying to get a better representation of how faces appear. So we're trying to get a better image than that one I showed you at the start of the presentation. So 71% of patients said that, participants said that their vision was blurred. 33% said they had visual disturbances. And what I mean by that are black flecks, having lights, blobs and floaters. So one quote that I have that really represents that is one of the people said, it's like looking through a screen or looking through black tulle. So it's kind of looking through a screen when you look in the environment, and that's how their vision has been changed with AMD. 29% said they saw shape distortions. So the distortion is quite bad. On the one side, the mouth goes up and the eyes disappear, or it looks blurred or moving. So distortions are things like, you know, some sort of deformity, so things move around or change shape, or jumbled or scrunched. So one other person with moderate AMD said the face is kind of jumbled, as if the face were on a piece of fabric and then someone grabs it from behind, and it's all scrunched up. So they're the kind of descriptions people said about faces to them. Of course, as I said before, there's a lot of factors that make this variable. So lighting, for example, time of day, treatment phase. If you are getting injections with wet AMD, the treatment phase can affect your ability to see faces, and general variability in vision. So one of our participants with severe vision loss said, sometimes I can see and sometimes I can't. So that there's variability in what people can see from day to day. Well, that's what they reported. So people do use various strategies to try to recognize others by their face and their emotions. So for identity, for example, they might use body shape or size, or their gait or the way they walk, their hairstyle, clothing, voice and context. And for expression, people said they use body language and voice, so tone of voice. But 50% said the strategies didn't work. So one person with moderate AMD said, I can make some terrible mistakes. My strategies help, but they are certainly not foolproof. And another one with mild AMD said, I'm not sure that my strategies are very effective at all. So lots of factors can impact the strategies. So things like crowds can make things more difficult, and how close you are to someone. So we can generally recognize someone that we're closer to. So strategies tend to work if nothing changes. So as I said before, if you get a haircut and people recognize you by your hair, that's going to be a problem. And a woman said she misidentified her husband and was at the shops and grabbed his arm and went walking with him, and it wasn't her husband. So he had recently lost weight and she just grabbed the wrong man. So of course she was embarrassed by that, but as long as it's Hugh Jackman, absolutely fine, she can take him home. So there's definitely some strategies people use as compensation for not being able to see the face, but they definitely report that they're not particularly successful all the time. So lip reading is really important, especially for older adults who have, or anyone who has hearing loss. It's also really important when we're in a noisy environment. So when you're in a noisy environment, we all look at lips to get a better understanding of what someone's saying. And also, if English isn't your first language with the person you're communicating with, we tend to look at lips then as well. And with eye gaze, we look at people's eyes to see if they're looking at us, to see if they're interested in what we're saying, and get those kind of cues. So 52% of people said that they have impaired perception of eye gaze. So this person said, if I'm sitting around talking to anyone in a circle or anything, I can't see their eyes. So another person said, looking at someone on the other side of the table, I can't see if they're looking at me or someone else. And I've been thinking about this in the context of COVID and social distancing. So in some ways, this is even more complicated because we're, further away than what we would normally be in social situations. So of course, it makes it even more difficult to see these social cues. Nearly half of the participants said they have issues seeing facial speech. So what I mean by that is to be able to lip read. And this person said, I can't see the mouth at all, no way. And another person with mild disease said that they, their face-to-face conversations are associated with lip reading because they use the lips and it's very difficult. So not being able to see lips, particularly when you rely on that for social interactions, makes it really hard. So what are the effects of poor face perception on social interactions? So in relation to recognising other people by their face, so by their identity, a lot of people said that to avoid making mistakes, 43% said they are more cautious and more hesitant and more non-committal. So that means like I wait, I don't call out to someone or I don't, say something across the room until I'm really sure who they are. So I often wait until I'm spoken to. And another person said, 57% said they worry about what others think. They worry because they walk past people that people might think they're unfriendly or rude. And a person said, I know I walk past people and I ignore them because I can't see them. I'm sure I upset other people and what they think of me, I don't know, but it worries me. So there's a real concern that if I don't see someone, how will they interpret that? In relation to the effects of poor face perception on social interactions in regards to expression, 38% said that they experience social interactions, it's harder because they can't see expressions. So it's embarrassing when you can't pick up correctly whether someone's happy or not. So you might be really happy and having a lovely time and you don't actually see that they're frowning and not looking too chipper themselves. So it's not knowing what's going on because you can't see their facial expressions and you can't determine their mood. There was an example of a woman who went to her doctor with her daughter and she got the impression that he was upset with her. So she says, boy, he was cranky, wasn't he? Did I do something to upset him? And the daughter says, no, Mum, he was just having a laugh and making a few jokes to break the ice. And unfortunately, the person with AMD just couldn't see those cues. So she said, oh, he sounded as if he was cranky and I couldn't work it out. And the daughter said, oh, no, Mum, he was smiling. So we can misinterpret social situations when we can't see facial expressions. So a lot of participants, 76%, said they feel like they're missing out in social situations. So missing out on the full quality, so I can't join in. And there's this quote that probably the one I remember the most from this study, and it says, I sat there at a social function for fully 2 hours, not knowing who the people at the table were, and that was pretty distressing. So this person went to a function and for whatever reason, she didn't end up sitting next to the person who she thought she would, and she was there on her own. So there was no one there to tell her who was at the table. In this missing out, people said things like, you don't feel like you're part of the crowd, you're not getting out of the conversation what you would normally get out. And another person said, things at funerals where you know a lot of people and you can't recognize them. It's disappointing afterwards when you hear that some people were there that you would have liked to have seen, but you didn't know. So sort of after an event, you might think, oh, I didn't know Bob was there. And if I did, I definitely would have gone to say hi. So there's that real sense of missing out in social interactions. So what is the impact of making mistakes? Participants reported feeling embarrassed, frustrated, and sad and upset. And people also said that other people don't understand how AMD affects their vision. So they say that people forget. So you might tell your loved ones, you remember I can't see very well, and they're, oh, sorry, I forgot that. And one thing about that is that people don't understand the nature of macular degeneration. So they don't understand why you can't see their face, but you can walk around. So they don't understand the difference between peripheral vision and the activities we can do using our peripheral vision, and central vision and the activities we do using our central vision. So they don't seem to understand, why can you walk around, but you can't actually recognize me? So it's about people not understanding, and they forget that you have vision loss because of those inconsistencies that they see. So 38% people say that they worry that people think they're faking their vision loss or putting it on, and they often say that they feel like a fraud. So this quote here, a couple of people have specifically said to me, in appearance, you don't look as if you have a problem with your vision. Your eyes look perfectly normal. So I'm not really sure why someone thinks vision loss is related to how your eyes look, but obviously this person did. So of course, there's no evidence on your eyes that you can't, see well if you've got macular degeneration. So that's a common sort of theme that came out. And there was someone who said, lots of family and friends kind of test me. So they say, well, how can you see that, but you can't see that? So they don't understand the way that macular degeneration works. So how do people deal with mistakes? Over 50% said they apologize because they're embarrassed. So they say, I'm sorry, I've got vision loss, I can't see you. So that's sort of the natural response. 90% said they explain that they have vision loss and they wear a vision impaired badge. Now, not all people want to disclose their vision loss to everybody. So people do not feel comfortable necessarily telling everybody that they have vision loss. They feel that they don't need to, but if they make a mistake, they often would disclose to sort of give people context of what's happening. Half the participants used humour, so I'll have a joke, grab the wrong husband and walk off with them and see how that goes. So having a joke. And 86% to say they just pretend it didn't happen. So let it go, pretend that's not a problem and move on. So people would say things like, I just try to look like I know what I'm doing, and there's nothing you can do about it, so you just got to get on with it. So what about others? How do others respond when you make mistakes? So 52% said most people responded quite well. So they would have a laugh as well. They would ask if you need some help and be kind. And, that's a lovely way to respond. 50% said they have no idea how others respond because they couldn't see it. So when I say, how did they respond? They're like, I don't know, I couldn't see how they responded. And 30% said others can get upset and angry. So an example of that, there was a lady who went to an activity and she said she went to the corner to read the newspaper or to have a look at something. And she said she didn't know that someone was in the room that she knew. So she said she went over to get a glass of water and I walked straight past her and she yelled at me, you didn't even speak to me. She frightened the life out of me. I didn't even know she was there. And I said to her, I'm so sorry. I didn't even see you there because I'm vision impaired. You know that. And anyway, there was a bit of a discussion. I was crying and I said I didn't mean to ignore you. So this person knew she had vision loss but forgot and took it really personally and was quite upset that this person couldn't see her. So you can see there's a problem in social interactions if people don't understand AMD, and if they respond in this way, you feel pretty terrible about it. So what are some longer term consequences of having poor face perception, and how do they impact social life, confidence, and quality of life? So 76%, so 3/4 of the participants said that having impaired face perception has reduced my quality of life. 62% said it has reduced my confidence, and the same percentage said I disengage, I isolate, or I withdraw in social situations, and nearly half said I'm less willing to have social interactions. So there's a lot of long-term consequences there when you can't see faces or can't see them very well. And this person says, I'm more passive, definitely less interactive, and I tend to stay in the background. I don't socialize anymore. And there it says with new people. So a lot of people said, look, I'm happy to socialise with my friends and family and people I know well, but meeting new people is just too hard. So I don't want to meet new people. Another person just said, I'm less interactive. Another one said, you become a sort of a loner. And this quote, I'm more mousy now. I go up to the social area and sit down quietly. Whereas one time I would have been the president, I think it's made me more introverted. So there's that sense of just withdrawing in social situations because they don't want to make mistakes. They don't want to upset other people. And so it's just easier to sort of disengage. People often refer to having a feeling of loss. So this person said, it's very important for me to be able to see other people's faces. I want to see them, and it's very distressing that I can't, and I want to see them. So this depends on your personality type. It depends on how much you love seeing faces or not. But this person, face perception was very important to them. And there was another person who said, you know, at her workplace that she loved the fact that one of her, you know, specialties was recognizing people as they walked into the workplace who'd come to talk to her boss, and she would know who they are because she would recognize them. And she said, it used to be my pride. I could recognize people and give him the name. Now I can't do that anymore, and it feels as though it's not me. So some real sense of loss around not being able to see faces. But there was definitely a lot of resilience. So not being able to see facial expressions used to make me upset, as if I've lost something, lost a person sort of, but I've kind of got used to it now. So you either got to get up and go, or you sit in your chair and die, and I think I'd rather get up and go. So a lot of people had quotes around, well, it's a problem, but I'm not going to stop my life because of it. So that person had mild AMD. This person as well, I think social withdrawal could happen to me. It could happen to people, but I don't let it happen to me. I imagine that it could make me more passive, and maybe it will get me that way eventually, but at the moment I'm still fighting it. So they're like, yep, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. And the last person, unless you sort of make an effort, you could have a very miserable life, and I'm just not prepared to have a very miserable life. So there's a lot of resiliency and determination. Yes, this is tricky, but I'm not going to stop it, stop it or make it interfere with my everyday life. So the summary from this study is that participants reported recurrent failures to recognize others by their identity, their facial expressions, and their emotional states. They also said their alternative strategies are far from effective. Sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. They reported failures to follow things up, the social nuances that we get when we interact socially. So they couldn't tell if someone was joking because they missed out on those social cues, and they feel like I'm missing out, so I can't join in, especially in group situations. They're concerned about upsetting others or offending them by unintentionally ignoring them, and most participants reported that they disengaged socially to avoid all these issues. So we do know from this study that poor face perception in AMD contributed to impaired social interactions and a reduced confidence and quality of life. So they're the findings. So that's part one of the study. Part two of the study is, what do we do with this information? So we use the information to develop these 3 community resources. So we developed a brochure and an information sheet and a conversation starter. So these are sort of the brochures, the intro, the information sheet is more comprehensive, and then the conversation starter is more comprehensive again. And we also developed a questionnaire, the Seeing Faces and Social Life in AMD questionnaire. So there are questionnaires used routinely in research in macular degeneration, for example, the National Eye Institute Visual Function Questionnaire, and that does have 1 or 2 questions about faces. But there's other questionnaires used often in research that don't have questions about faces at all. So one of them is the Macular Disease Quality of Life measure. So we want to, we've established a measure, we developed a measure, and we want to see if we can use it in research as well. So where can you find these resources? Niv will help you with this as well. But if you go to the Macular Disease Foundation Australia website, this is where you find it. So I did an article on this study last year, and this is what it looks like. And when you go down the page on the internet, it has the 3 resources. So there's the brochure, the information sheet, and the conversation starter. If you'd like to read the research paper, there's a link to that as well. And there's a link to the ANU site as well. So I did a news article for ANU, and you can go back that way as well. So all these are really easy to get online, and you don't need to pay for the paper, it's open access. So I just want to quickly go through the resources, but you can certainly find these online, as I've said. So the first one is the brochure, and that's my now 15-year-old daughter. And basically we just give basic information. So things like what I've said today, you know, faces are harder to see for people living with macular degeneration. You know, it can cause issues with social interactions and provides basic tips for family members. So I'll go through those more comprehensively in a minute. So that's the starting point. So here is the information sheet, and we basically wanted to give people in a few pages some more information. So it talks about the common mistakes that people make with macular degeneration and social interactions. So not being able to recognize people they know, accidentally saying hi to people they don't know, using strategies, but again, they're not always effective, not being able to see facial expressions, and finding crowds difficult. So there's some quotes there and some examples of those issues that we, you know, got from the study. They're saying again, people don't understand how AMD affects my vision, and people might think I'm being rude or unfriendly when of course I'm not, I just can't see your face. And we've talked about social situations. So, you know, the things around people being passive or disengaged. Now, I do know that people with macular degeneration are more at risk of having depression, but you can see that people think, oh, she's just depressed, when actually, no, I can't see faces. So it's about disentangling those things. Withdrawing and losing confidence. And then there's a quote there about resiliency. So I want to keep up my social life and I don't give up. So some tips. So for people living with AMD, as I said before, some people are happy to disclose their diagnosis and some people aren't, and that's absolutely fine. But if you are happy to disclose, it's reminding people, because they do forget. So remember, I said my eyesight's bad. Getting people to sit in the position that makes it easier for you, so where the lighting is better, or if they're better on the left or the right-hand side, for example, is something that you can tell others to do. So there's a couple of strategies for people living with AMD. Also, what can friends and families and carers do? So a lot of these are verbal cues. So things like saying who you are as you walk in a room. When you're in a group situation, just say, oh, Bob, how was you know, your holiday last year? So you're giving the person with macular degeneration ideas of who you're talking to and who's talking. For facial expressions, verbalize. So, oh, Jill, you're looking happy today. What's happening with you? Or just outright asking. So how are you going today? You're a bit quiet. So asking people to tell you how they're feeling rather than relying on their expressions when you can't see it. For people who are friends and family and carers, recognizing that the person with macular degeneration is not faking, trying to understand better the inconsistencies between central vision and peripheral vision and what that means in everyday life, and asking them, you know, tell me about what you can see or can't see. Do you have a scotoma in your central vision or not? You know, when you get closer to a person and you're having a conversation, can you see my face? So asking those kind of questions. And the next part is this conversation starter. And this is really the tool to sit down with a person with macular degeneration and saying, I really want to know about your ability to see faces and what that means for you, and let's have a good chat about it. So it has things about seeing faces, what happens in social interactions, and what other people can do to help. So that's that resource as well. So we've also got the questionnaire that we've developed, and we're testing it now. So it asks about all these things that I've talked about, and we're trying to get more information. So it asks about seeing faces. What do faces look like to you? How much do other people understand? We ask about social situations, and again, what can people do to help? So this is a research study that my PhD student, Corinne, is doing. And if you'd love to participate, we need about 10 to 15 people living with macular degeneration who has AMD in both their eyes. So you need to have trouble seeing faces in your everyday life and be 65 years or older. You need to be able to hear well over the phone because it'll be an interview similar to this study that I've talked about today over the phone. Because of COVID-19, we're not doing any face-to-face interactions. It's all over the telephone. So if you can hear well, to have a chat with my PhD student, and essentially she'll ask you questions that we've talked about today to optimise this face questionnaire measure that we've developed. So if you're interested, you can contact Corinne, my PhD student there. There's her email address and phone number, but I'm sure Niv can help out with that if you're interested and you contact her. So getting to the end, that's nearly done for today. So I just wanted to thank again the Macular Disease Foundation Australia for inviting me today. To everyone listening today and engaged, thank you for coming. And I want to thank all the people living with macular degeneration who was part of our study. They provided their time and valuable information for us to optimise these resources. So thank you, and my excellent research team. So I think that's it for me.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jo. That was great. Give me one moment and I'll pass it back over to myself.
Good.
Great. So thank you again to Jo for presenting today. I think it was a really interesting webinar and I learned a lot, definitely. If you do have any questions about anything that Jo spoke about, you can, of course, ask them through the right-hand side panel. I'll show you how to do that again. So first, you'll just press on that questions icon, type your question into the white box, and then press send. So just before we move on to the questions, I'm just going to briefly go over what we do here at the MDFA. So our goal is to reduce the incidence and impact of macular diseases, and we do this through a number of pillars, the first being in prevention and early detection. So we provide accurate, current and ongoing information. Just last year, we reached over 7,000 people doing talks just as this one. We aim to raise awareness of macular diseases and encourage people to get their eyes tested for early detection. The second is in supports and services. So we provide support for all patients, facilitate access to other support services as well. Our aim is to support people living with macular diseases to continue to live well. We are very proud to be the voice of the macular disease community. It is our privilege to advocate for the very best interests of the macular community in order to ensure that they continue to have access to the support and services that they require. And finally, research and data. 100% of funds that are donated to research go into our research grants program. Since 2011, we've given over $4 million to 21 different research projects. We aim to promote research for better health outcomes, and our CSI surveys inform what we do and provide an evidence base for our stakeholders and decision makers. So now this is how we can help you. You can contact us on our toll-free national helpline number, which I've said a lot of times today, but I'll say it again, 1-800-111-709 for any questions you might have, not only about age-related macular degeneration, but also if you have questions about how My Aged Care works or how Medicare works, we can also help you out there as well. If you are someone who doesn't speak English as a first language, we can also provide translated materials. We do have a wealth of resources that we can send out for free, and you can see all of our resources on our website, www.mdfoundation.com.au. Now I can see we have a lot of questions coming through, so I might bring back Jo and we'll go through a couple of them before we end the webinar today. Hello. Great.
Am I back? Yeah, there I am.
Back again. So one question here is, what are people doing to enhance face recognition using technology?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So this was actually the other part of my PhD. So we wanted to give you this qualitative study, but we also wanted to use methods that enhance face perception. So our lab are looking at things like software applications. So one thing that I looked at was an application we call caricaturing. So essentially that's where the software uses a very complex algorithm, and that's why we have engineers on the team, to enhance the special features of the face that are unique to that person. So it's kind of like the caricaturing you see in the newspapers, or in, I shouldn't say newspapers, people probably don't even look at them anymore, but it's enhancing the faces using this software program to make it easier to identify people. And we found that this method is quite successful in improving identification and expression perception. Unfortunately, it's not available. It's only for research purposes at this time. But we are looking at strategies. So there's that sort of caricaturing using software on a tablet or an iPhone, for example, that it just enhances the faces automatically. Another thing we're looking at is the bionic eye. And even though for the moment the imagery is quite crude, it's just working out, you know, how does the brain see the face? How can we enhance the face using technology like that? So early days, unfortunately, with this kind of thing, but it's really about using software on easily accessible devices that will enable people to see faces easier.
Yeah, easier, yeah, exactly. So early days, but exciting things are happening as well.
Yeah.
Perfect. So another question I have here, this maybe has to do a bit more with your research. So how do you deal with having to depend on people helping you? So say, how did you find that a lot of the people who were part of your study, you know, when they'd gone from being supporting other people and helping people in their life to then needing that help? Did you get a lot of information from your participants in that way?
Yeah, I mean, none of us want vision loss, and none of us particularly anticipate it either. So it can become as quite a shock, and especially in a degenerative kind of condition, it can mean that your vision will get worse, and people really struggle with that change, which is fair enough. It's a big part of people's experience. So people said that, you know, they would rely on a faithful few, so a daughter or a child or a loved one to help them. But there's definitely that sense of feeling like they're, you know, over relying on them. But we found that most people, like if I went to a doctor's appointment with my daughter and I couldn't see well, they're absolutely quite happy to say, hey, mum, you missed that social cue. Just to sort of look out for you. So yes, a lot of people struggled with the transition of asking for help, but when they did, most people often said, you know, they're fabulous, they're really great at helping me. And another thing is giving people advice on what to do. So if I'm in the room and Bob's there today, can you please tell me, because I really want to talk to him. So and vice versa, saying, hey mum, there's 4 people here that you know, do you want to see them or not? And then you can make that decision.
Yeah, okay, excellent. We do have quite a few more clinical questions, so I might leave those for now, and maybe we can, the people who sent those through, we can contact them after the webinar just to provide some more personal information. Question we have here is not being able to see faces when they sit with the sun behind them a part of AMD or something else? If I sit with the sun behind me, I don't have such a problem.
Yeah, this was a really interesting part of what we found in our study. Is some people said bright light was great, and other people said they hated it, and other people depend on the day. And it actually frustrated their partners, actually. So one woman I remember particularly said, I drive my husband nuts because I change my preference all the time. So one is recognizing it might be variable. Some people say the light behind is absolutely terrible because the shadowing on the face means they cannot see the face at all, whereas other people say bright light on the face is helpful. So this is where you would ask the person with macular degeneration, are we in the right lighting for you to be able to see as much of my face as you can? So would you prefer to be inside or outside, or do you want me to move to the left or to the right? So recognize it is variable, and it actually varies within an individual as well. And I recognise that's frustrating for people around you, but it's better to ask and say, I can't see your face, can you move over for me?
Yeah, exactly. If it's as simple as getting up and moving your chair, it can't be that hard, right?
Yep.
This is more of a comment, but interesting, no mention of scent or smell as a coping strategy. Do you find that people also use smell as a strategy for when they are losing more of their vision in terms of seeing faces and being familiar with their surrounds?
Wow, no, no one in my study mentioned scent whatsoever. I suppose because we were really focused on visual strategies. So that's why, probably why scent didn't come up. But of course, that's a really good reminder that, you know, if someone wears a cologne, we expect that if they walked in the room, the only trouble with that is if someone wears the same one and we misinterpret that. But no, I think because we visual cues, scent wasn't mentioned, but that's a really good point.
Yeah, awesome. And this is the final question. I think I can probably also almost answer this. It's just asking about whether the foundation is, how the foundation is progressing with slowing of macular degeneration. And we do have a lot of research going on right now. So for anyone who's interested in a research update, we do actually have a research update flyer that comes out a couple times a year. So if you're interested in that, you can always email us at education@mdfoundation.com.au or just call our helpline number, which I've mentioned a lot of times, but I'll say it again and again, 1-800-111-709. So I think we might leave the questions at that for now. Thank you so much, Jo, for popping on and answering all those questions. And
no worries, thanks for having me.
Thank you. And thank you to all of you for asking all those questions. Have a couple of small things before we finish up.